Nashville, Tennessee. These are live images, by the way, so we'll be monitoring her remarks. Jeff Zeleny, to you, what do you make of this news?
Well, look, it's an extraordinary turn of events because we know that Kristen was saying their loyalty is very important to the president. He wants to, that's one of the biggest differences. He's not fired really anyone in this, but I think that she crossed a line very clearly in terms of one, she said in the hearing to the senators that the president approved of this massive ad campaign. The president told Reuters that he did not. So that is one violation there. But also, this is a political benefit for President Trump. Immigration was a strength of the president. It is now a massive political weakness. Heading into the midterm election campaign, the president getting rid of Kristi Noem certainly is something of it's relieving the pressure and the endless drip about questions about immigration. And by saying he's nominating a senator, senators almost always get confirmed for positions. We don't know that, of course. There'll be a long, drawn-out confirmation process, questions about the mission of the Department of Homeland Security. But Senator Markwayne Mullins is respected by both sides of the aisle. So very interesting that he is nominating the senator as well. But the president effectively wanting to put a political problem on the side.
Yeah, it's really interesting. And if we could bring in Manu to talk about this, because even though, Manu, I think he has his best shot here nominating a senator, it's for a position that is so embattled in its own right and wrapped up in the policy. It's not just Kristi Noem, right? This is the policy of President Trump. And Senator Mullin has been a stalwart supporter, champion of Trump's policies. You know, I know it's early yet, but how do you see this going?
Yeah, he has defended Trump on pretty much every issue under the sun, no matter how controversial. Markwayne Mullin has been there to defend Donald Trump and is undoubtedly one of his most unflinchingly loyal allies here in the Capitol. So that hearing, when that happens before the Senate Homeland Security and Governmental Affairs Committee, will probably be heated at times. But Mullin, as Jeff is pointing out, does have relationships on both sides of the aisle, and some good relationships with Democrats as well. And he is well liked among Republican senators, and there are some Republican senators and Democratic senators who are not looked favorably upon by their colleagues, but that's not the case with Mullin, who does have good relationships in a body where relationships are so critical, which all means that his chances of confirmation are very, very high. Unless there's something significant slip up between now and then, you can almost rest assured that he will get that position. But yes, indeed, this comes and at a politically fraught time for this agency, which of course is shut down right now amid this battle between Democrats and the White House over the president's deployment of ICE agents across the country. Democratic demands for changing how ICE officers are being used, everything from requiring them to take off masks, wear body cameras, to changing how they are going about getting warrants for enforcing these immigration actions, none of which the White House has agreed to, at least from what the Democrats are demanding, which is why this government agency is shut down. So how will Markwayne Mullin approach this if, in fact, the shutdown is still happening by the time he goes before the Senate for his confirmation hearings? That will be one big question. But at the moment, a lot of Republicans, including one of the biggest critics of Kristi Noem, Tom Tillis, just told reporters that he is very much in favor of Markwayne Mullin getting this position. And Tillis was one of the few Republicans who went as far as saying that Noem should resign and resign immediately. So a sign of that the Republican support will be there, and perhaps some Democrats too. Guys.
Manu, please stand by. Just to let our viewers know, Noem is actually speaking right now live in Nashville, and we've been monitoring her remarks. She's apparently been talking about the history of DHS, though she's not directly addressed this news that Trump has ousted her as its secretary. Let's go to Priscilla Alvarez now. And Priscilla, you have a lot of sources at DHS. I understand that they shared some colorful thoughts with you about this news.
Yeah, multiple officials are stunned by this news, not so much because these officials had a lot of confidence in the secretary and her management in the department, but rather because this happened so quickly after these two congressional hearings, which, as you heard from Kristen was the catalyst to the president making this decision. Look, the officials that I have been speaking with over the last year have raised multiple concerns over the way that the secretary was managing the department, and not only her, but her chief advisor, Corey Lewandowski, who was serving as a special government employee. In other words, he was supposed to be there on a temporary basis. I had one Homeland Security official who just hours ago, as we were talking about the secretary, told me this, quote, "People are tired of their shit. Honestly, it's been unreal." And that captures what I have been hearing from so many officials over the last several months in a department, by the way, that under the first Trump administration had experienced a lot of turnover. They had multiple secretaries serving in acting capacities during the first Trump administration. Of course, this is a department that is charged with the president's campaign promise of mass deportation. So the department has really pivoted all of its might toward immigration, and that has caused frustration within the department. But it's always been clear to the officials who have been there that whoever was leading the department had a tall task, because it is a department charged with this responsibility. And for that reason, the way the secretary was handling the department, especially with Minneapolis in the wake of the shootings of two U.S. citizens who were fatally shot by federal agents, they were just shocked by the way that the secretary handled those initial moments. Remember, she called them a domestic terrorist. She was asked to apologize this week by lawmakers. She maintained her stance and instead extended her condolences. But it was all of these missteps, as these officials saw it, that they believed was going to ultimately lead to her ouster. The question, however, was when or if that was going to happen, given the president's public confidence that he had expressed about the secretary. But now, as we know, he has made the decision to oust her, to place her in another position. In the meantime, to have the senator to serve as the secretary. So currently, officials are talking amongst themselves and trying to game out what happens next year, what this means for them. Some of whom recall this vividly from the first Trump administration when when multiple secretaries were ousted.
Yeah, and Priscilla, there were just so many moments that were terrible for her coming out of these hearing days, from the taxpayer money to the tune of, hundreds of millions of dollars being used on an ad campaign, and she was challenged obviously by the Republican senator over that. But this luxury plane issue, right, where she was asked, they tried to pin her down on this. It has we've sort of seen pictures of it, and there's a bedroom in it, and she was asked about that, and she just was saying that it was being reconfigured. But it seemed kind of apparent by what she was saying that actually, indeed, this is a pretty nice plane. It's got a bedroom in it. There was the blankie incident that came up. I mean, there were just so many moments.
Well, and just to provide context here, remember, this is the Department of Homeland Security that got a historic cash infusion. This was from last year when Congress passed that one big beautiful bill giving billions of dollars to this department. And so with all of that, the question was, how will she distribute those funds? And that is the scrutiny that she was under because of the planes that were purchased that the department said were going to be retrofitted. But as you mentioned, these were luxury jets. In addition to that, it was not only the other funds that they were doling out for example, that ad campaign that was filmed last year, but also she had a rule that she had to sign off on contracts that were over $100,000. And as you know, the federal government often operates with higher costs than $100,000. So that was slowing down a lot of contracts. And that in of itself was creating frustration, not only internally in the department, but also with all of the vendors that they work with who were trying to submit for these contracts and to be part of this deportation campaign the president was embarking on. But then in addition to that, you mentioned the blanket. To fill in viewers, there has been, and this is something that she had to answer to this past week, allegations of a romantic relationship with her chief advisor, Corey Lewandowski. She refuted that to be the case. She was asked about it, particularly during the House hearing yesterday. But it was those concerns, too, over the relationship she shared with her chief advisor, who, again, was only supposed to be there on a temporary basis as a special government employee and wielded enormous power and influence over the department. I have heard multiple stories of people being fired at Corey Lewandowski's whim. And so when you take this in totality, both the amount of money that the department was given, how it was distributed, and the various concerns and frustrations over how the secretary and her chief advisor were handling that, it led to this moment, and is why Homeland Security officials I've been speaking with are stunned that the president announced this, but not so surprised that it ultimately came to be this way.
Priscilla Alvarez, thank you so much for that reporting. As we take a quick break following this breaking news that President Trump is replacing former DHS Secretary Kristi Noem with Senator Mark Wayne Mullen of Oklahoma. We are monitoring her remarks live in Nashville. Our understanding is that she has not yet addressed this news. If she does, we'll of course bring it to you live. We'll continue following the story in just moments. Don't go anywhere.
We know there's many more of us.
Say something.